3:47 p.m., 9 days before giving birth. The hospital calls. We're canceling your C-section. No reason, just canceled. 4 hours later, I'm staring at my husband's laptop, and there it is, an email. Confirmation, Amber Vale, rhinoplasty, November 14th, 9:30 a.m., Dr. Morrison, $4,500 paid in full. November 14th, that's my date, 9:30 a.m., that's my time. Dr. Morrison, that's my surgeon. My billionaire husband canceled the C-section that could save my life, so his 26-year-old mistress could get a nose job. And that was just the beginning of his plan to get rid of me. This is how I survived. The phone rang at 3:47 in the afternoon on November 5th, 9 days before I was supposed to give birth to my second child. I was in the nursery folding tiny clothes that still smelled like lavender detergent. Everything had to be perfect for this baby. Everything had to be ready. Mrs. Pierce? The woman's voice was professional but strained. This is Jennifer from Dr. Morrison's office. I'm calling about your scheduled cesarean section. I set down the pale yellow onesie I'd been holding. Yes? Is everything okay? There was a pause, a long pause, the kind that makes your heart start racing. Mrs. Pierce, I'm very sorry to inform you that we need to cancel your procedure scheduled for November 14th. The room tilted. Cancel? I don't understand. Cancel as in reschedule? Cancel as in we can no longer perform the procedure. Her voice got quieter, like she was reading from a script. I'm truly sorry. Someone from our office will be in touch about alternative arrangements. My hand started shaking. Jennifer, I can't just reschedule like it's a haircut appointment. I'm high risk. My first cesarean with my son was an emergency. Dr. Morrison told me I need a carefully scheduled procedure this time. I can't go into labor naturally. I understand, Mrs. Pierce. I'm so sorry. Wait, who made this decision? Did Dr. Morrison approve this? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details. Again, I'm very sorry. The line went dead. I sat there, phone pressed against my ear, listening to silence. The baby kicked inside me. Hard, like she knew something was wrong. My name is Madison Pierce, 34 years old, mother to Ethan, who's 4, wife to Grant Pierce for 10 years. We live in an $11.5 million estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. From the outside, my life looks perfect. But that phone call? That was the moment I discovered I'd been living a lie. I tried calling my husband, straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, 6 times, each call going directly to his recorded voice telling me he was unavailable. Grant Pierce, billionaire, CEO of Pierce Medical Technologies. Net worth $780 million. Too busy to answer his wife's call when she's 8.5 months pregnant and her surgery just got canceled. I checked our joint bank account on my phone. $847. Usually there was at least $50,000 in that account. Tried my personal credit card. The one I use for groceries and Target runs, maxed out. $15,000 limit I never authorized. Something was very, very wrong. I looked around the nursery, the room I'd painted myself 2 months ago when Grant was on another business trip. Pale yellow walls, white furniture, everything perfect and ready. The baby kicked again, persistent, demanding. I know, I whispered, hand on my belly. I know something's wrong. I made a decision. Grant kept his home office locked most of the time. He was paranoid about privacy, about security. But sometimes when he was in a hurry, he forgot. I walked down the hallway. The door was unlocked. I shouldn't have gone in. I knew I shouldn't, but I did. His laptop sat on the desk, open, screen glowing. I touched the trackpad, no password required. And there, right on the screen, was an email from Harmony Hills Surgical Center to Grant Pierce, subject confirmation, Amber Vale rhinoplasty procedure. My breath caught. I read it once, then again, then a third time because my brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. This confirms the surgical procedure for Miss Amber Vale, scheduled for Thursday, November 14th at 9:30 in the morning. Surgeon, Dr. David Morrison. Procedure, rhinoplasty, cosmetic. Location, Pierce Medical Aesthetics Center, Greenwich. Total cost, $48,500. Paid in full. November 14th, 9:30 in the morning. Dr. Morrison, that was my date, my time, my surgeon. My billionaire husband had canceled my emergency cesarean section so his 26-year-old executive assistant could get a nose job. The room spun, my milk let down, an involuntary stress response. 2 wet circles spread across my maternity dress. I grabbed the desk edge. "I'm not crazy," I said out loud. "Something is very, very wrong." My hands were shaking as I started clicking through folders on his laptop. I should have stopped. I should have confronted him. But I kept going. A folder labeled Amber, personal. Hundreds of text messages. Grant, can't wait to see you tonight. Tell me what you're wearing. Amber, your wife called the office today. I told her you were in Boston. Grant, good girl. This will all be over soon. Date stamp 3 days ago. I kept clicking. A folder labeled Penthouse Closing Docs. Property deed, 421 Harbor View, Stamford, Connecticut. $6.8 million. Names on the deed. Grant Pierce and Amber Vale. Closing date, September 18th. 6 weeks ago, my signature on the marital asset disclosure form, except I'd never signed it. That wasn't my signature. More folders, bank statements, joint investment account, Madison plus Grant. $3.2 million withdrawn over 8 months. New account opened in Amber Vale's name. Monthly transfers, $50,000, $75,000, $120,000. Latest transfer dated yesterday, $200,000. I kept going, unable to stop now. A folder labeled Trips, March 15th through 18th, Cabo San Lucas. I'd been 20 weeks pregnant, scheduled for my anatomy scan. Grant said he had an emergency board meeting. Hotel reservation, 4 Seasons Cabo, 2 rooms, $8,400. Charged to Pierce Medical, corporate card. June 8th, my birthday. Grant canceled our dinner. Said Amber was having a career crisis and needed help. Florist receipt, orchid arrangement for Amber Vale, $1,200. My birthday gift that year. Grocery store flowers, $19.99. September 10th through 15th. Paris. Grant told me he had a medical conference. Hotel Ritz Paris, Royal Suite, 5 nights, $47,000. Cartier receipt, diamond tennis bracelet, $89,000 shipped to A Vale. Then I found it. The text exchange from November 4th. Yesterday. Amber, when are you finally telling her? I'm tired of hiding. Grant, after the baby comes, she's too pregnant to fight back right now. Once she's recovering from surgery, I'll have my lawyers serve the papers. She'll be too weak to resist. Amber, what about the kids? Grant, Ethan will adjust. The new baby won't remember any of this. Kids are resilient. Amber, I want to move into the main house. The penthouse is nice, but I want the estate. Grant, you'll have it, I promise. Just a few more weeks. Amber, I love you. Thank you for finally choosing me. Grant, I chose you a long time ago, baby. Madison was just the incubator for my heirs. You're my real partner. I read that last message 3 times. Incubator. That's what I was to him. An incubator for his children. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone, but I started taking pictures. Every email, every receipt, every text message, every piece of evidence that my perfect marriage was a carefully constructed lie. The baby kicked frantically, responding to my spiking blood pressure. Then I heard it, the sound that made my blood run cold. The garage door opening. Grant was home. I met him in the kitchen. I'd printed the email about Amber's surgery. My hands shook as I held the paper. We need to talk, I said. Grant barely glanced up from his phone. Can it wait? Conference call in 10 minutes. No, it can't wait. I slid the email across the granite counter. He looked at it. His expression didn't change. Not even a flicker. Oh, right. I meant to tell you about that. The casualness in his voice stunned me. You meant to tell me? Grant, I'm 9 days from my due date. I'm high risk. I can't just... I found you another doctor. St. Mary's Hospital. It's all arranged. St. Mary's is a free clinic. He finally looked at me. Really looked at me. It's a perfectly adequate public hospital. You're having a baby, Madison. Women do it every day. You don't need the best surgeon in Connecticut for a routine delivery. Routine, way. My voice rose. My first cesarean was an emergency. I almost died. Ethan almost died. Dr. Morrison said I need a carefully scheduled procedure with someone who knows my history. You're being dramatic. Silence hung between us. You gave my surgeon to Amber, I said quietly, for a nose job. His jaw tightened. There, the first crack in his mask. How do you know about that? Your laptop. You left it open. Instantly, he was angry. You went through my private files? That's a violation, Madison. You canceled my surgery for your mistress's nose job. Don't be dramatic, and don't call Amber that. She's my executive assistant. I saw the text, the penthouse deed, the bank transfers. Grant, you've been having an affair for years. He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was ice cold. So you know. The way he said it, so calm, so matter-of-fact, made my blood run cold. That's it? That's all you have to say? So you know? What do you want me to, Madison? That I'm sorry. He set down his phone. I'm not. Amber and I have a connection, something real, something I haven't felt in years. We have 2 children. We have a marriage. We have an arrangement. We have a family structure that benefits both of us. That's not the same as a partnership. An arrangement? I couldn't breathe. I'm your wife, he sighed like I was being tedious. You're the mother of my children. That's valuable. But it's not enough. Surely you understand that. Plenty of successful men have modern arrangements. Did you ask me if I wanted a modern arrangement? I'm asking now. The room tilted. What are you saying? I'm saying we can make this work. You stay here, raise the children, maintain the household, and Amber and I can join. You want me to share you. I want us all to be reasonable adults. When were you planning to tell me? My voice broke. Or were you just going to serve me divorce papers while I was recovering from surgery? His face hardened. You read that too. You called me an incubator. I was frustrated. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant every word. From upstairs, Ethan started crying. The shouting had woken him. Now look what you've done, Grant said. You've upset our son. I've upset him. I have a conference call. We'll discuss this later, when you've calmed down. He walked toward his office. We're not done talking about this. He turned back. Yes, Madison, we are. The decision is made. You can accept it and we move forward as a family. Or you can make this difficult. Your choice. He closed the office door. I stood alone in the kitchen. Milk leaking through my dress. My son crying upstairs. My marriage ending in front of my eyes. I slid down the kitchen cabinet to the floor. I couldn't stand anymore. The baby kicked frantically, responding to my spiking blood pressure. Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs. Mommy, why is Daddy yelling? I forced a smile through tears. It's okay, baby. Mommy's coming. I pulled myself up, went to comfort my son, because that's what mothers do. They keep going, even when their world is ending. That night, after Ethan finally fell asleep, I sat in the dark nursery, the room I'd painted, the clothes I'd folded, the crib I'd assembled while Grant was on yet another business trip. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my contacts, found the name I needed. Harper Daniels, my college roommate, my best friend, now a partner at one of the top family law firms in Connecticut. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. I'd been too busy. That's what I told myself. But the truth was, Grant didn't like me spending time with Harper. He said she was a bad influence, too aggressive, too feminist, too much. I'd listened to him. I'd let my best friendship fade because my husband didn't approve. I stared at her name. It was 12:04 in the morning. I hit call. Hello? Harper's voice was groggy. Harper, it's me. Madison, instantly awake. What's wrong? I need help. Tell me where you are. I'm coming. I'm home. But Harper, Grant's here, and I do not know what to do. Did he hurt you? Not physically, but Harper, he canceled my cesarean section. He gave my surgeon to his mistress for plastic surgery, and he wants me to just accept it. Accept her. Accept everything. Silence. Then, that motherfucker! I started crying. I don't know what to do. I'm 9 days from giving birth. I have no money. He emptied our accounts. I have nowhere to go. And Ethan, stop. Listen to me. Do not make any decisions tonight. Do not tell Grant you called me. Can you do that? Yes. I'm coming over tomorrow, 8 in the morning. Grant will be gone, right? He's always gone. Good. We're going to fix this. I promise you, Madison. We're going to burn his whole world down. Harper arrived at 8:17 in the morning, power suit, briefcase, fury in her eyes. She took one look at me, puffy-eyed and exhausted and 8 months pregnant, and pulled me into a hug. Show me everything. We spent 4 hours in Grant's office. Harper photographed every email, every bank statement, every text message, the forged signature on the penthouse deed, the corporate card statements showing affair expenses charged to the company, the calendar showing his divorce timeline. Madison, Harper said, scrolling through the files. This is a gold mine. He documented everything. He was so confident you'd never find out. What do I do? We fight, but first we protect you. Boss, she laid out the plan. Step 1, emergency medical care. She called Dr. Patricia Wells, head of obstetrics at Mercy General Hospital. They scheduled my cesarean section for November 13th, one day before my original date. Dr. Wells would file protective medical orders, so Grant couldn't make any decisions about my health care. Step 2, financial protection. Open a new bank account in my maiden name, Madison Taylor. Transfer $400,000 from the joint savings, not stealing. Securing marital assets. Step 3, legal protection. Harper would file emergency protective orders, medical and financial. We'd build a case for full custody and maximum child support. Step 4, evidence preservation. Everything I'd photographed would be uploaded to a secure cloud only Harper could access. Harper, I can't afford you. Grant took everything. You're not paying me. You're my best friend. And that piece of garbage tried to kill you. What? Harper pulled up my medical file on her laptop. Madison, you have placenta previa. Dr. Morrison documented it at 28 weeks. I know. That's why I need the scheduled cesarean. If you go into labor naturally with placenta previa, you hemorrhage. You and the baby could die within minutes. The room went cold. Grant knows that. He's seen all my medical records. Exactly. He canceled your surgery, scheduled his mistress at the same time with the same doctor, and planned to have you go to an understaffed public hospital that's not equipped for your condition. He wanted me to die in childbirth. I can't prove intent yet, but at minimum, it's reckless endangerment. At maximum, it's attempted murder. That night, I slept in the guest room with the door locked. For the first time in days, I felt safe. I had a plan. I had a lawyer. I had a new doctor. Dr. Wells had called personally. Mrs. Pierce, your cesarean section is scheduled for Wednesday, November 13th at 8 in the morning. Nothing and no one can change that. You and your baby will be safe. I lay in bed, hand on my belly, thinking, we're going to be okay. Harper's going to fix this. I didn't know that Grant had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. I woke to banging on the guest room door at 6:47 in the morning. Madison, open this door. Go away. Open it now or I'm getting Rosa to bring the key. I unlocked the door. Grant stood there, showered and suited, terrifyingly calm. You transferred $400,000 from our account yesterday. It's my money too. And you hired Harper Daniels. My heart pounded. How did you really think I wouldn't find out? I have alerts on all our accounts, and Harper's firm called my office yesterday as a courtesy to inform me she's representing you. He stepped into the room. I backed up. I gave you a chance to be reasonable. You chose war. You're having an affair. You tried to cancel my... And now you're going to learn what happens when you try to embarrass me. He turned and walked away. What does that mean? Grant, what does that mean? He didn't answer, just got in his car and drove away. At 8:52, Harper called. Her voice was frantic. Madison, listen carefully. Don't panic. Grant filed first at 6 this morning, before the courthouse even opened. He had his lawyers waiting outside. Filed what? Emergency custody petition, temporary restraining order, Injunction blocking your cesarean section. All of it. I couldn't breathe. But Madison, he got Judge Richard Barnes. Barnes is Grant's golf buddy. The restraining order is already signed. You have to leave the house. Today. By 2 this afternoon. This is my house. Legally, it's in Grant's name only. You're not on the deed. I was stunned. He said we'd add my name after Ethan was born, but he planned this, Madison. He's been planning this for a long time. Harper read me the petition. Grant claimed I was mentally unstable and a danger to myself and the children. He had evidence. Ring doorbell footage edited to make me look erratic. A statement from his mother, Patricia, claiming I'd been increasingly paranoid and irrational during pregnancy. A psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Leonard Strauss, who Grant had paid $25,000 to write an assessment based on descriptions of my behavior. And the injunction blocking my cesarean section claimed I was doctor shopping and the procedure was medically unnecessary elective surgery. Harper, if I go into labor naturally, I could die. The baby could die. I know, we're filing an emergency appeal, but Madison, it takes time. The hearing isn't until the 11th. That's 4 days from now. My cesarean is scheduled for the 13th. What if I go into labor before then? Then you go to St. Mary's and pray. At 1:47 in the afternoon, police arrived. 2 young officers, uncomfortable with what they had to do. Mrs. Pierce, we have a court order. You need to vacate the premises by 2 this afternoon. I'm 8 days from giving birth. Where am I supposed to go? Behind the officers stood a man in a suit with a video camera. Grant's attorney documenting everything for the custody case. Mrs. Pierce, for the record, are you refusing to comply with a lawful court order? I looked directly at the camera. I'm 9 months pregnant. I have a 4-year-old son, and my husband is forcing me out of my home because I discovered he's having an affair. Harper arrived, pushed past the lawyer. Don't say another word, Madison. Officers, my client is complying. She needs 20 minutes to finish packing. At 2:14, I left my home. 3 suitcases, Ethan's stuffed dinosaur, the baby's hospital bag. Rosa, our housekeeper, was crying. Senora, I'm so sorry. I hugged her. It's not your fault. I buckled Ethan into his car seat. He clutched his dinosaur, silent now in shock. Where's Daddy? He whispered. Daddy's at work. When can we come home? I don't know, baby. I don't know. I drove away, didn't look back. In my rearview mirror, Grant's lawyer was still filming. Harper had arranged emergency housing. Riverside Women's Shelter, 40 minutes from Greenwich. A small apartment in a converted office building. 2 bedrooms with bunk beds. Tiny kitchen. Shared bathroom down the hall. Donated toys in the corner, worn from use. Ethan wouldn't leave my side. He clung to my leg. I don't like it here. I want to go home. I knelt down. I know, sweetheart. But we're safe here. That's what matters. Why did Daddy make us leave? I couldn't answer. I just started crying. A woman appeared in the doorway. African-American, early 30s, kind eyes. 2 little girls peeked out from behind her. You're Madison Pierce. I saw you on the local news this morning. I was horrified. It's on the news? Tech CEO files emergency custody petition, claims wife unstable. Your husband's public relations team is working overtime. She introduced herself as Shayla Robinson. She brought over macaroni and cheese. We sat at the tiny kitchen table while Ethan watched cartoons on my phone. Can I ask you something? Shayla said. You have money for good lawyers, right? My best friend's representing me. She's really good. Shayla showed me photos on her phone. Brutal images of injuries, broken ribs, fractured jaw. My ex put me in the hospital, twice. I have hospital records. Police reports, photos. I filed 3 restraining orders. He violated all of them. Showed up at my work, at my daughter's school. The judge kept giving him one more chance. But the evidence? Evidence doesn't matter when you can't afford the lawyer who knows how to present it. Public defender handled my case. She was juggling 140 other cases. She didn't even read my file before the hearing. Shayla looked at me. I'm not mad at you for having resources. I'm glad you'll probably get justice. I just wish the system protected all of us the same way. I realized something I'd never had to face before. You're right, I have privilege. Even here, even in this. Use it, tell your story, but tell ours too, because women like me, we don't get press conference and fancy lawyers. We just survive, if we're lucky. That night, I lay in the narrow shelter bed, Ethan asleep beside me, hand clutching my shirt. The baby kicked. Hard. Persistent. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Saw you on the news. You got what you deserved. Stealing money, turning his kids against him. You're pathetic. Then another. Crazy bitch should lose her kids. Then another. Grant's public relations machine, turning public opinion against me. I turned off my phone. I know, I whispered to the baby. I know you want out. Just hold on. Please, baby girl, hold on. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, November 8th, my phone rang, unknown number. Is this Madison Pierce? Who is this? My name is Jessica Thornton. You don't know me, but I know your husband, and I know what he's doing to you. Long pause. Because he did it to me, too. Jessica Thornton walked into the coffee shop in Hartford at 2 in the afternoon. Thin, nervous, hair pulled back tight. She scanned the room before sitting down. I almost didn't come, she said. I told myself to stay out of it, but then I saw the news and I couldn't let him do it again. She pulled out a folder, handed it to me. I was married to Grant, 2008 to 2012. He's erased me from his history completely, but I kept records. Jessica had met Grant at Columbia Business School. She came from old Philadelphia money, family worth $50 million. Grant was charming, ambitious. They married within 8 months. The pattern started immediately. Grant took over her finances, isolated her from friends and family. Constant criticism about her weight, her clothes, her intelligence. When she got pregnant in 2011, Grant forced an abortion. It's too soon. We're building our empire. A baby would ruin everything. Terrified of losing him, Jessica complied. She got pregnant again in 2012. This time she refused the abortion. Grant filed for divorce immediately, claiming Jessica was mentally unstable and unfit. Then came the commitment. Grant had Jessica involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility. His mother, Patricia, testified that Jessica was a danger to herself. The facility was Silver Hills Hospital, where Patricia sat on the 3 months of forced treatment, heavy medication, electroconvulsive therapy, isolation. In the divorce, Jessica lost everything. Grant claimed her family money was gifted to the marriage. He took $2.3 million of her inheritance. She left with nothing, signing a prenup she didn't remember agreeing to. Later, she discovered she'd signed it while medicated. Jessica miscarried while in Silver Hills. The stress, the medication. She spent 10 years rebuilding her life, changed her name, moved to Oregon, hasn't had a relationship since. He told everyone I was crazy, Jessica said, hands shaking. Eventually, I started to believe it myself. That's what he does. He gaslights you until you don't trust your own mind. Why are you telling me this? Because I won't let him do it again. I stayed silent for 10 years. I let him get away with it. But not this time. She pushed the folder toward me. Medical records proving she wasn't mentally ill before Grant. Financial records proving he stole her inheritance. Court documents showing perjury he'd committed, and a small digital recorder. Recording of Grant and Patricia discussing how to handle the Jessica situation. I was wearing a wire the last time I saw them, before the commitment hearing. I was stunned. You have proof he did this before. Yes, and Harper can use this. Pattern of behavior shows he's a serial abuser. Why didn't you use this before? In your own case? Tears filled her eyes. I was terrified. He threatened to have me committed permanently if I fought back. Said no one would believe a crazy woman over a successful businessman. And he was right. No one believed me. She looked at me. But you have resources I didn't have. You have a powerful lawyer. You have public attention. You can stop him. Jessica, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just beat him. For both of us. That evening, Harper called me from her office. She'd reviewed Jessica's evidence with 3 associates. Madison, this changes everything. With Jessica's testimony and evidence, we can prove Grant has a pattern. He's done this before. That destroys his credibility. Can we win? The hearing is Monday. We're filing emergency motions tomorrow with Jessica's evidence. I think yes. I think we can win this. In my cesarean section, Judge Barnes will have to lift the injunction. There's no legal basis for it once we show Grant's pattern of medical abuse. I'll have my surgery. I'll be safe. You and the baby will both be safe, I promise. That night I slept for the first time in days. I dreamed of holding my daughter, of being free. I didn't know that Grant had been monitoring Harper's office. Didn't know he'd known about Jessica's involvement for 36 hours. Didn't know he'd been preparing his counterstrike. November 11th, 9 in the morning. I stood outside the New Haven County Courthouse, one hand on my swollen belly, the other clutching Harper's arm for support. "Where's Jessica?" I whispered, scanning the crowd of people streaming into the building. Harper checked her phone. "Shwemano. She'll be here. She's probably just nervous." The courthouse loomed above us, all granite and glass, a monument to justice that suddenly felt more like a trap. I was 8.5 months pregnant, exhausted down to my bones, terrified of what the next few hours would bring. Grant was already inside. I'd seen him arrive 10 minutes earlier. Tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Hair perfectly styled. Calm. Utterly, terrifyingly calm. His attorney, William Frost, stood beside him, 60-something, silver-haired, with the cold eyes of a predator who'd spent decades devouring opponents in courtrooms exactly like this one. He had a reputation. Harper had warned me. Frost doesn't fight fair. He fights to win. Behind Grant sat his mother, Patricia Pierce, designer suit in navy blue, pearls at her throat. She looked at me as I entered, and her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like satisfaction. We took our seats. Harper spread files across the table in front of us. Jessica's evidence, medical records, financial documents, the recording that would prove Grant had done this before. "She'll be here," Harper said again. But I heard the doubt creeping into her voice. At 9:15, the courtroom doors opened. Jessica Thornton walked in. She looked worse than when I'd met her at the coffee shop. Pale, shaking, her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Jessica?" I started to stand, but Harper pulled me back down. "Something's wrong," Harper muttered. Jessica walked straight to Harper, leaned down, whispered to something I couldn't hear. Harper's face went white. "No," Harper said. "Jessica, we talked about this. We prepared." Jessica was crying now. "I can't. I'm sorry. I can't." They went into the hallway. Through the glass doors, I watched Harper gesturing, pleading, Jessica shaking her head, backing away. Grant turned in his seat, looked at me, smiled. He knew. Somehow, he knew what was happening. Jessica ran, actually ran out of the courthouse, her footsteps echoing on the marble floors. Harper came back alone. Her jaw was set, but her eyes were devastated. "She can't testify," Harper said quietly. "Grant's lawyers called her yesterday. They have things, information about her psychiatric hospitalizations after the divorce, about restraining orders filed against her by ex-boyfriends. They're painting her as unstable, a serial accuser. She's too terrified to go through it again. But the evidence, they're going to say she fabricated it, that she's obsessed with Grant, that this is all part of her delusion." My contractions started then. Not labor, not yet, but Braxton Hicks contractions. My uterus tightening in response to the stress flooding my system. Judge Richard Barnes entered, 68 years old, distinguished gray hair, expensive watch that caught the light as he took his seat, Grant's golf buddy, Grant's mother's friend, Grant's judge. "Your Honor," Harper stood, "we have new evidence of Mr. Pierce's pattern of abuse toward his previous wife, Jessica Thornton. Miss Thornton was married to Mr. Pierce from 2008 to 2012. During that marriage, Mr. Pierce had her involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility, stole her inheritance, and—" William Frost rose slowly, deliberately. "Your Honor, I'd like to address this so-called evidence." He walked to the bench carrying a folder so thick it must have weighed 5 pounds. He'd been prepared. He'd known exactly what we were going to present. Jessica Thornton, Frost began, his voice smooth as silk, has been psychiatrically hospitalized 5 times since her divorce from Mr. Pierce. She has restraining orders filed against her by 2 separate ex-partners, both of whom claim Miss Thornton made false accusations of abuse when they attempted to end their relationships. He opened the folder, pulled out medical records. Miss Thornton has been diagnosed with the borderline personality disorder with paranoid features. She has a documented history of creating elaborate fantasies about people she believes have wronged her. Harper tried to interrupt. Your Honor, those diagnoses came after Mr. Pierce had Miss Thornton committed. Before her marriage, she had no history of mental illness. We have medical records that prove. We also have affidavits, Frost continued, speaking over Harper, from Miss Thornton's college roommates. All of them describe her as emotionally unstable, even in her early 20s. The pattern existed long before she met Mr. Pierce. He turned to face me. Your Honor, Miss Thornton contacted Mrs. Pierce online approximately 1 week ago. This contact was not coincidental. Miss Thornton has been following Mr. Pierce's life obsessively for years. She has sent him hundreds of messages, threats, accusations. Frost pulled out printed screenshots, text messages from Jessica's phone number to Grant's, spanning years. I know what you did to me. You ruined my life. I'm going to expose you. You'll pay for what you did. Grant had kept every single message, built a paper trail that made Jessica look like a stalker instead of a victim. My stomach turned. Another contraction, stronger this time. Furthermore, Frost said, and his voice took on a tone of righteous indignation, we have evidence that Mrs. Pierce and Miss Thornton conspired to fabricate these allegations. He pulled out more papers, text messages, between my phone and Jessica's phone, but I hadn't sent those messages. I knew I hadn't. The first one read, we need to make sure our stories match. Another, if we both say the same things about him, they'll have to believe us. Another, he deserves to lose everything. We'll make sure he does. Your Honor, Harper was on her feet, voice rising. My client did not send those messages. Her phone was clearly compromised. This is a convenient claim, Frost interrupted smoothly. Your Honor, what we have here is a transparent conspiracy to commit fraud. Mrs. Pierce discovered her husband's professional relationship with Miss Vale. Rather than behave reasonably, she chose to steal $400,000 from marital accounts, hire an aggressive attorney, and enlist the help of Mr. Pierce's mentally unstable ex-wife to manufacture a pattern of abuse. Judge Barnes leaned forward. He was looking at me with disgust. Actual disgust. Miss Daniels, Yidi said, his voice cold, I am extremely disappointed. This court takes false allegations very seriously. Your Honor, I had no knowledge. Mrs. Pierce's phone records will be subpoenaed. We'll see whether these messages came from her device. But frankly, the evidence of conspiracy is compelling. Miss Thornton has a documented history of fabricating abuse allegations, and now she's recruited Mrs. Pierce to her cause. Another contortion hit me. I gasped, doubled over. Harper's hand was on my back. Your Honor, Harper said desperately, my client is in distress. Can we take a brief recess? No, Judge Barnes was already making notes. Miss Thornton's testimony is excluded. Her evidence is inadmissible as it appears to be part of a coordinated fraud intended to defame Mr. Pierce. Your Honor, please. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning you, Miss Daniels. $10,000 for bringing a frivolous motion and wasting this court's time. You're an experienced attorney. You should have vetted your witness more carefully. Harper's face went red. Your Honor, I had no knowledge that the evidence was anything other than genuine. Miss Thornton approached my client. I believed her testimony in good faith. Then you exercised poor judgment. Judge Barnes closed his folder. The emergency motion to lift the restraining order is denied. The injunction blocking Mrs. Pierce's elective surgery remains in place. Custody arrangements remain disordered. We'll reconvene for a full hearing in 30 days. He raised his gavel. Your Honor, Harper's voice cracked. Mrs. Pierce is scheduled to give birth in 2 days. She has a high-risk condition, placenta previa. If she goes into labor naturally, she could hemorrhage. She and the baby could die. She needs a scheduled cesarean section with a qualified surgeon who understands her medical history. Judge Barnes looked at me, paused. For just a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, doubt maybe, or concern, but then it was gone. Then she should go to the hospital I recommended in my original order. St. Mary's Hospital is perfectly capable of handling Mrs. Pierce's delivery. The medical experts consulted by Mr. Pierce's attorneys have assured this court that Mrs. Pierce's condition, while requiring monitoring, does not necessitate the expensive specialist care she's demanding. Those experts haven't examined her. They're basing their opinions on. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. Judge Barnes left. Grant stood, buttoned his suit jacket, turned to look at me. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, just looked at me with those cold eyes, and I understood. This had all been planned, every single move. He'd known Jessica would come forward. He'd prepared for it, turned her into a weapon against me. In the hallway, I couldn't stand. Harper held me up, my arm around her shoulders. He knew, I said. He knew Jessica was coming. He set a trap. He's been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. How did he clone my phone? I don't know, but Madison, we need to focus on. A contraction hit me so hard I couldn't speak. I bent double, gasping. Oh God, Harper said. Madison, are you? I'm having contractions. What? Since when? Since the middle of the hearing. I thought it was just stress. Braxton Hicks. But Harper, they're getting closer together. She pulled out her phone, started timing. Another contraction, then another. 4 minutes apart, she said, her voice tight with panic. We need to get you to the hospital, right now. As we were leaving the courthouse, moving as fast as my pregnant body would allow, Grant stepped into our path. He looked at me, just looked at me, and spoke in that same calm, cold voice. You should have been reasonable, Madison. You should have accepted the situation. Now look what you've done to yourself. Get out of my way, I said through gritted teeth. St. Mary's is a good hospital. They'll take care of you. He paused. Maybe this time you'll learn your lesson about trying to embarrass me in public. Harper tried to push past him. If she dies because of you, then it will be tragic, Grant said. But not my fault. I tried to help her. I offered her options. The court will confirm that. I've been nothing but reasonable throughout this entire process. He stepped aside. Let us pass. Patricia appeared from behind a column. She'd been waiting, watching. You brought this on yourself, dear, she said to me, her voice soft and venomous. Grant gave you everything, a beautiful home, financial security, 2 lovely children. All you had to do was be grateful. But you couldn't manage even that simple task, could you? Another contraction. I grabbed the wall. He tried to kill me, I gasped. Patricia's expression didn't change. Don't be dramatic, you're having a baby. Women do it every day. You're not special, Madison, you never were. She turned and followed her son down the courthouse steps. Harper was calling for a car. We're going to Mercy Hospital. Dr. Wells will. You heard the judge. They won't let Dr. Wells operate. The injunction is still in place. This is a medical emergency. No injunction can. Harper, I grabbed her arm. Another contraction was building. I'm scared. She looked at me, really looked at me, saw the fear in my eyes. I know, she said, but you're going to survive this. You and your baby are going to make it. And then Madison, I swear to God, we're going to destroy him. I doubled over, felt something give way inside me. Harper, I whispered, my water just broke. It was 11:42 at night. Harper drove like she was being chased, weaving through traffic on Interstate 95. I was in the back seat, trying to breathe through contractions that were coming faster now. 2 minutes apart, I gasped between breaths. Harper, they're 2 minutes apart. She had her phone on speaker, calling Dr. Wells. Patricia, it's Harper Daniels. Madison's in labor. We're 10 minutes from Mercy General. We need you there. We need you now. Dr. Wells' voice came through, tight with stress. Harper, I can't. The injunction. If I operate on Madison, I lose my medical license. This is a medical emergency. The injunction doesn't apply to. Judge Barnes called the hospital administrator. Personally, at 7 o'clock this evening. Dr. Wells's voice broke. He said if I interfere with the court's orders, he'll have me charged with contempt. and he'll report me to the state medical board for violating a court order. Harper, I could lose my license permanently. I could go to jail. I screamed through another contraction. The baby was pressing down. Hard. My body was trying to push. She's dying, Harper shouted into the phone. Patricia, Madison is dying. Patricia, take her to St. Mary's. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The line went dead. No, Harper said. No, no, no. This can't be happening. It's okay, E. My voice sounded strange, distant. Just get me to St. Mary's. Madison, you heard what the doctor said about that place. It's not equipped for... I don't have a choice. I grabbed the back of her seat. Harper, drive. Just drive. St. Mary's Hospital, 12:04 in the morning. The emergency room was chaos, fluorescent lights flickering, every chair filled, people on the floor, crying babies, someone coughing. The smell of antiseptic mixed with something worse. Harper ran to the triage desk. She's in active labor, placenta previa. She needs a cesarean section immediately. The nurse looked exhausted. Nurse Carol Stevens, her name tag said, 58 years old if she was a day. She'd probably been on shift since before dinner. What's her doctor's name? Dr. David Morrison, but he's not here. We need... Nurse Carol checked her computer, clicked through screens. Her face fell. Dr. Morrison was scheduled to be on call tonight, but he's not here and we don't have an obstetrician on staff right now. What? Harper's voice rose. How can you not have an obstetrician? Our regular OB called in sick this morning. We've been calling for backup coverage all day. The nearest available OB is at County General, 45 minutes away. I felt another contraction building. This one was different, stronger. My body was taking over, trying to deliver this baby whether I was ready or not. She has placenta previa, Harper was shouting now. Do you understand what that means? She needs a specialist. I understand, ma'am, but I screamed. Couldn't help it. The contraction was so strong I saw white spots in my vision. Get her to exam 4. Nurse Carol was suddenly moving fast. Page Dr. Richardson, tell him we have a placenta previa abruption. Tell him to get here now. They wheeled me down a hallway. Every bump sent pain shooting through me. The gurney's wheel was squeaking. The sound drove into my brain like a drill. Exam room 4 was barely large enough for the gurney and the ultrasound machine. Dr. Kevin Richardson appeared, 39, maybe 40 years old. He looked terrified. Mrs. Pierce, I'm Dr. Richardson. I'm a general surgeon. I need to examine you. He did. I felt him checking, felt the ultrasound wand on my belly. Okay. His voice was steady, but I could hear the fear underneath. You're 7 centimeters dilated. The baby's heart rate is dropping. I can see on the ultrasound that your placenta is abrupting. It's tearing away from the uterine wall. Harper grabbed his arm. What does that mean? It means she's hemorrhaging internally. The bleeding is significant, and the baby's losing oxygen with every minute that passes. How long do we have? 15 minutes, maybe 20. If I don't operate soon, you'll both die. Then operate, I begged. Please. Dr. Richardson looked at me, really looked at me. Mrs. Pierce, I need to be completely honest with you. I'm a general surgeon. I've performed cesarean sections before, but I've never done one with placenta previa abruption. This is a highly specialized procedure. If I cut in the wrong place, you'll hemorrhage faster than we can replace the blood. If I'm too slow, the baby dies from lack of oxygen. This should be done by a maternal fetal medicine specialist, and we don't have one. Silence. Just the sound of my ragged breathing, the monitor beeping, the baby's heartbeat on the speakers, getting slower, weaker. Harper was crying. What are you saying? I'm saying I can try, but there's a very real chance, a significant chance, that one or both of you won't survive this. I looked at the monitor, watched my baby's heartbeat, 60 beats per minute. That was too slow, way too slow. Normal was 120 to 160. Do it, I said. My voice was clear, steady. Whatever happens to me, you save my baby. You hear me, doctor? You save my baby. Mrs. Pierce, promise me. Promise me right now. I promise. He turned to the nurses. Get her prepped. We're going to OR immediately. Harper was holding my hand. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. Madison, no, we're going to get you to County General. We'll find a specialist. There's no time. I squeezed her hand. You heard him, Harper. If I don't make it, you take care of Ethan. You promise me. You raise him. You tell him his mother loved him. You're going to tell him yourself. And my baby girl, you tell her I fought for her. You tell her every day of her life that I loved her enough to fight. Even when I was scared. Even when I knew I might not make it. You tell her that, Harper. Madison, please. But they were already wheeling me away. In the hallway, as we rushed toward the operating room, Nurse Carol suddenly appeared beside the gurney. Mrs. Pierce, she said, her voice low and urgent. I need to tell you something. Your husband was here tonight. Everything stopped. What? Grant Pierce. He came to the emergency room around 9:30 before you arrived. I was at the nurse's station. I saw him. Harper was running alongside us now. Why would he be here? He went into Dr. Peters' office. Dr. Alan Peters. He's our on-call obstetrician, the one who was supposed to be here tonight. I watched your husband go in there. They talked for maybe 10 minutes. Then I saw him hand Dr. Peters something. An envelope. Thick. Like it was full of cash. My vision was blurring. Another contraction. But I understood. He paid him off. 20 minutes after your husband left, Dr. Peters suddenly got called away for a family emergency. Wouldn't say what it was. Wouldn't say where he was going. He's still not answering his phone. Nurse Carol pulled out her cell phone. I recorded the security footage on my phone. I couldn't stop what was happening, but I wasn't going to let him get away with it. She showed us the video. Grainy but clear enough. Grant in scrubs trying to disguise himself, talking to a man in a white coat, handing him an envelope. The doctor opening it, counting what was inside, shaking Grant's hand. That's attempted murder, Harper said. Her voice was shaking. He paid the doctor to abandon his patient. He wanted Madison to die here. You survived this, Nurse Carol said to me. I shall be Billionaire. And I'll testify. I'll make sure he goes to prison. I promise you that. Another contraction. So strong I couldn't respond, just nodded. They pushed through double doors into pre-op. Harper wasn't allowed past this point. She grabbed my hand one last time. Fight, she said. You fight for that baby. You fight for Ethan. You fight for every woman who's been told that she's crazy or dramatic or too emotional. You survive this, Madison. You hear me? You survive. Then she was gone, and I was alone with strangers who were trying to save my life. Dr. Richardson was scrubbing in, moving fast, but not fast enough. Harper had stepped out to the hallway. She was on the phone. I could hear her voice through the walls. Send the video Carol gave to the police immediately. I want Grant Pierce arrested tonight. I want him. Her phone rang. I heard her answer. Hello? A pause, then. Dr. Wells, what? You're coming. But I thought I couldn't hear the rest. Dr. Richardson was putting a mask over my face. We're going to give you something for the pain. Try to stay calm. Try to breathe. The room was spinning. The monitor was beeping faster. Alarms going off. Then Harper burst through the doors. Wait, stop. Don't start cutting. Dr. Wells is coming. Dr. Richardson looked up. What? She's 15 minutes away. She's breaking the injunction. She's coming to save Madison. I can't wait 15 minutes. Look at the monitor. She's hemorrhaging internally right now. The baby's heart rate is 60 beats per minute. If I wait, can you stabilize her? Can you keep her alive for 15 minutes? He looked at the monitors, at me, at the clock. Maybe, if we're lucky. But if Dr. Wells doesn't get here, if there's traffic, if anything delays her, they'll both die. Harper looked at me. Madison, I found strength somewhere, deep inside, where mothers find strength when their children need them. I'll hold on, I whispered. I'm not dying today. Meanwhile, across town, Amber Vale lay on an operating table in a luxury medical spa. Harmony Hills Surgical Center. Soft lighting, classical music playing. The air smelled like vanilla and lavender. Dr. David Morrison bent over her nose, working carefully, precisely. This was delicate work, expensive work, $48,500 worth of work. How much longer, doctor? The surgical nurse asked. 20 minutes, maybe 30. I want this perfect. Miss Vale is paying for perfection. In the waiting room, Grant Pierce sat in a leather chair, reading a magazine about luxury watches. Calm, completely calm. His phone buzzed. Text from his private investigator. Madison admitted to St. Mary's, in labor. No OB on site. Grant smiled, deleted the text, looked at his Rolex, almost 1 in the morning. He pulled up photos on his phone. Amber's consultation pictures. Before and after simulations of what her nose would look like after surgery. Perfect, he said to himself. Everything's going perfectly. Back at St. Mary's, they had me in the hallway outside the operating room, waiting. Every second felt like an hour. The baby's heart rate kept dropping. 55, 50, 45. We're out of time, Dr. Richardson shouted. I have to operate now. She's almost here, Harper was crying. Please, just 1 more minute. She doesn't have 1 more minute. Neither of them do. The doors burst open. Dr. Patricia Wells ran in, still wearing her street clothes. Out of breath, her hair was a mess. I'm here, she gasped. I'm here. Someone get me scrubbed in. Now, operating room 3 at St. Mary's Hospital. 12:57 in the morning. Dr. Wells worked with the precision of someone who'd done this 47 times before. Her hands were steady even though she was risking everything to be here. Placenta is 70% abrupted, she said, her voice calm and clinical. Massive hemorrhaging. She's lost over 2 liters of blood already. Blood pressure dropping, the surgical nurse called out. ISD over 50. Give me 2 units of O negative right now and keep them coming. We're going to need at least 4 more. She cut through layers, skin, fat, muscle. The movements were economical, fast but controlled. Baby's in distress, Dr. Wells said. Heart rate down to 60. We need to get her out immediately. She reached the uterus, made the final cut. At 1:03 in the morning, I heard it. A cry. Tiny, weak, but alive. She's here, Dr. Wells said. She's alive. The NICU team swarmed around the warming table. I couldn't see what they were doing. Could only hear the voices. She's blue, not breathing well. Starting resuscitation. Come on, baby. Come on. 30 seconds. That felt like 30 years. Then a stronger cry. Louder. Angry. She's pinking up. Respiratory rate improving. She's going to make it. Dr. Wells was still working on me. I felt tugging, pressure, but no pain. The anesthesia was working. You hear that, Madison? Dr. Wells said. Your daughter is alive. She's breathing. Now you need to stay with me. You stay with me. Don't you dare die on me now. I'm trying, I whispered. My blood pressure crashed. I heard the alarm, heard voices getting urgent. Pressure's 60 over 30. We're losing her. No, we're not. Dr. Wells' voice was fierce. Not today, not on my watch. Give me 2 more units, and someone call for a crash cart, just in case. 15 more minutes of surgery, every second measured in heartbeats and blood pressure, readings and prayers I didn't know I was saying. Finally, she's stable, blood pressure coming back up. We're closing. At 1:23 in the morning, in the recovery room, I woke up, groggy, confused. My baby? The words came out slurred. Harper was there. She'd been crying. Now she was smiling and crying at the same time. She's here, Madison. She's perfect. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. All her fingers and toes. She's beautiful. She's alive? You're both alive. A nurse appeared. She was holding a bundle wrapped in pink and white striped blankets. She placed the baby on my chest. I looked down at her. My daughter. This tiny person I'd fought so hard to protect. Hi, baby, I whispered. Hi, I'm your mama. I'm your mama. The baby made soft sounds. Her tiny hand found my finger, gripped it with surprising strength. We made it, I said to Harper. We actually made it. You fought like hell, both of you. I looked at my daughter, studied her face. Olivia, her name is Olivia. It means peace, perfect. I held Olivia and thought, it's over. We survived. Grant couldn't kill us. We're safe now. I didn't know the real battle was just beginning. November 13th, 8 in the morning. I woke to voices in my hospital room. Two people in suits, Detective Maria Santos and Detective James Reed, Connecticut State Police. Mrs. Pierce, I'm sorry to wake you, but we need to talk about your husband. Over the next hour, they showed me everything. Nurse Carol's security footage of Grant paying off Dr. Peters. Bank records showing a $50,000 cash withdrawal on November 11th. Text messages from Grant's phone that the police had subpoenaed. To Amber, after tonight, the Madison problem is solved. To his lawyer, make sure the operating room is understaffed when she arrives. To Dr. Peters, $50,000 for not being available. Don't answer your phone after 9 in the evening. Mrs. Pierce, Detective Santos said gently, your husband attempted to murder you. The words hung in the air. I'd known it. On some level, I'd known. But hearing it said out loud by a police detective made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I know, I said. We need your testimony. Everything that happened, the canceled cesarean section, the restraining order, the court hearing, the labor. All of it. I looked at Olivia sleeping in the bassinet beside my bed. Will he go to jail? If we can prove intent, yes, but we need you to be strong enough to testify. Can you do that? I reached out, touched Olivia's tiny hand. Yes, I can do that. Over the next 48 hours, the case built itself. Todd Brennan, Grant's business partner for 15 years, came forward. He'd found discrepancies in the company accounts, $8.2 million that couldn't be accounted for. Grant had been embezzling, using company funds for personal expenses, including payments to Amber Vale. If this goes to the SEC, Todd told the police, I lose everything, my reputation, my business, possibly my freedom if they think I knew about it. I'm testifying against him to save myself. Dr. David Morrison was shocked when police showed up at his office. Grant had told him I wanted to cancel my cesarean section, had shown him what looked like my signature on the cancellation forms. But it wasn't my signature. Grant had forged it. I trusted him, Dr. Morrison said. He owns the practice. I had no reason to question it, but this is medical fraud. I'm reporting it to the state board immediately. Then came the recordings. Nicole Vale, Amber's younger sister, showed up at Harper's office. Amber had called her from the hospital. Grant had hit her, hard enough to leave bruises. Amber had been covering for him, making excuses, but she'd also been recording him. Every conversation for the last 6 months. Insurance policy. Harper played the recordings for me. Grant's voice talking to Amber. Once Madison delivers, we have a 6-week window. She'll be weak, recovering, sleep deprived. That's when we strike with the divorce papers. She won't have the strength to fight. Amber, what if she tries to fight back anyway? Grant, she won't. She doesn't have the resources. And even if she tries, I've already paid off Judge Barnes. He'll rule in my favor on every motion. She'll lose custody. She'll lose the house. She'll lose everything. Another recording, this one from October. If something happens during delivery, if there are complications, it's tragic but convenient. Natural causes, an accident during childbirth. No one suspects the grieving widower, and I'd have both kids and full control of the assets. I listened to that one 3 times. He'd been planning this, not just planning to leave me, planning to kill me. Then Claire Sutton appeared. 24 years old, Grant's newest executive assistant. I hadn't even known she existed. Grant had hired her 3 months before Olivia was born, while I was on bed rest, while he was supposedly focused on being supportive. He told me Amber was getting too comfortable, Claire said. Said he needed fresh energy in the office. He started texting me, asking me to dinner, telling me he could do big things for my career if I was loyal. She showed the police text messages. Grant discussing what he called the rotation. Every 4 years, you need fresh energy. Madison had her time. Amber's almost up. You could be next if you play your cards right. November 15th, 7 in the morning, Pierce Medical Technologies headquarters in Stamford. Grant arrived for work in his Tesla. Photographers were already there lining the street. Harper had tipped them off. She wanted this public, wanted everyone to see. Detective Santos stepped forward. Grant Pierce, You're under arrest. For what? Grant looked genuinely shocked. Maybe he'd thought he was untouchable. Maybe he'd bought so many people, paid off so many officials, that he'd started to believe he was above the law. Attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, domestic violence, perjury, conspiracy. Should I keep going? She pulled out handcuffs, right there on the street, in front of the cameras, in front of his employees who were arriving for work. This is insane. I'm calling my lawyer. You do that from jail. Grant saw the cameras, realized what was happening. You can't do this. I have rights. This is harassment. So did your wife, Detective Santos said as she cuffed him. You tried to take hers away permanently. The perp walk. Grant let out in handcuffs, photographers swarming, employees watching from the windows. Some were filming on their phones. This would be online within minutes. Board members were arriving for an emergency meeting. They saw their CEO in handcuffs and turned around, pulling out their phones to call lawyers. Patricia Pierce arrived in her black town car. The driver opened her door. She stepped out, elegant as always. Saw her son in handcuffs. For the first time in my experience with her, Patricia Pierce looked shaken. She walked over to Grant's attorney, who'd just arrived. Fix this, whatever it costs. Do you understand me? Whatever it can. The lawyer looked at the police, at the cameras, at Grant in handcuffs. Mrs. Pierce, the evidence is substantial. I'm not sure we can. I didn't ask if you could. I said fix it. The bail hearing was that afternoon, Judge Lydia Thornton presiding. She was in her 50s, with no connection to Grant or his family. Judge Barnes had been forced to recuse himself. The police investigation had found evidence he'd taken bribes from Grant going back 3 years. The prosecutor laid out the charges, the evidence, Nurse Carol's video, the text messages, the recordings, Grant's own words condemning him. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, Mr. Pierce is a flight risk, net worth of $780 million, owns a private jet, has business connections in multiple countries. We request remand without bail. William Frost tried his best. Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman, a pillar of the community, father of 2 young children. He tried to murder the mother of those children, the prosecutor interrupted, while she was giving birth to his child. Judge Thornton looked at Grant with something close to disgust. Did you actually pay a doctor $50,000 to not be available when your wife went into labor? Your Honor, this is all taken out of context. Did you schedule your mistress's cosmetic surgery at the exact same time your wife was supposed to have a medically necessary cesarean section? That was an administrative error that nearly killed your wife and child. Judge Thornton consulted her notes. Bail is set at $10 million, cash only. You'll wear an ankle monitor. No contact with Mrs. Pierce or the children. Court is adjourned. Patricia posted the bail, $10 million in cash. She had that much liquid. Of course she did. As Grant was released with the ankle monitor, Patricia stood waiting. When he approached her, she spoke quietly. But I heard about it later. Harper had someone there. You were supposed to handle this quietly, Patricia said, like your father would have. Mother, I can explain. You embarrassed this family. The Pierce name is in every newspaper in the country. The stock dropped 23% this morning. Board members are calling for your resignation. This is all Madison's fault. She went through my private files. Patricia slapped him, hard, in the courthouse parking lot, in front of everyone. Don't you dare blame her. You did this. You were weak and stupid, and you got caught. She walked back to her car. Grant called after her. Mother, please. She didn't look back, just got in her car and left him standing there, a grown man wearing an ankle monitor in the ruins of his life. 5 days later, I stood at a podium outside St. Mary's Hospital, Harper beside me, baby Olivia in a carrier against my chest. I was exhausted, still recovering. But I needed to do this. Dozens of cameras, reporters, a crowd of supporters holding signs. We believe Madison. Justice for Madison. Time's up. I read from a prepared statement. My name is Madison Pierce. 2 weeks ago, my husband canceled my emergency cesarean section so his mistress could get a nose job from my surgeon. That's how I discovered I'd been living a lie. I told them everything, the affair, the stolen money, the forged documents, the canceled surgery, the attempt on my life. Grant Pierce will never hurt another woman. Not because the system protected me. It didn't. Judge Barnes was paid off. The hospital I was sent to almost killed me. The legal system tried to silence me. I'm alive because women helped women, because Nurse Carol documented the evidence, because Dr. Wells risked her license, because Harper fought when I couldn't. I announced the Olivia's Voice Foundation, free legal representation, medical advocacy, emergency housing, everything I'd needed and more women didn't have. I had resources most women don't, and that privilege comes with a responsibility. To Shayla Robinson, who I met at a shelter, and thousands of women like her. I'm fighting for you now, too. The video got 47 million views in 24 hours. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I testified. So did Harper. So did Nurse Carol and Dr. Wells and Todd Brennan. Amber testified. Claire testified. They showed the jury the recordings, the text messages, the evidence of Grant's pattern. On day 31, the verdict came. Guilty on every charge. At sentencing, Judge Thornton looked at me holding Olivia. Mr. Pierce, I've been on the bench for 27 years. I have never seen such calculated cruelty. 25 years in state prison. $47 million in restitution. No contact with me or the children. Grant was led away in handcuffs. He looked back once. I didn't look at him, just focused on Olivia. 1 year later, November again. The leaves were turning gold and red outside the windows of my new home. A 4-bedroom colonial in Westport. Not a mansion, but it was mine. Really mine. My name on the deed, my mortgage, my home. Ethan, now 5, sat at the kitchen table eating breakfast. Olivia, 13 months old, was in her high chair, cheerfully throwing Cheerios on the floor and laughing when our rescue dog Maggie ate them. I poured coffee. Decaf now. I was sleeping again. Actually sleeping. No nightmares anymore. Or at least, not every night. Mommy, is today the big day? Ethan asked. The foundation opening? Yes, buddy. Will there be cameras? Probably some. I don't like cameras. He'd had enough of cameras during the trial. The press had been relentless. You don't have to be in any pictures if you don't want to. This is Mommy's work day. Grandma Taylor is going to watch you and Olivia. My mother, who'd flown out from Oregon the day after Olivia was born and stayed for 3 months, who I'd pushed away for years because Grant didn't like her. Now we talked every day. The Olivia's Voice Foundation opened that afternoon, a converted office building downtown. Harper had helped me find it. Actually, Harper had bought it and donated it. She wouldn't admit it, but I knew. The building had space for lawyers, social workers, medical advocates, childcare, everything a woman needed to leave safely and start over. At the opening, I stood at a podium again. But this time I wasn't exhausted and traumatized. This time I was strong. A year ago, I was living in a shelter. I had nothing but 2 suitcases and my children. Today, I'm standing here because women helped women. This foundation exists to make sure every woman has access to the resources I was lucky enough to have. I looked out at the crowd, saw Shayla Robinson with her 2 daughters. I'd helped fund her legal case. She'd won full custody. Her ex was in prison for 3 years. Jessica Thornton had flown in from Oregon. She looked different, healthier. She was in therapy now. Finally dealing with what Grant had done to her. We'd become friends, bonded by trauma, but building something stronger now. Amber Vale stood in the back. We'd never be friends. Too much had happened. But she donated $100,000 to the foundation. Anonymously. I knew anyway. Nurse Carol was there. Retired now, serving on the foundation's board. Dr. Wells was our medical director. Her license had been fully reinstated. The state medical board had ruled she'd acted appropriately in an emergency situation. She'd saved 2 lives. That mattered more than a corrupt judge's injunction. Patricia Pierce wasn't there. She sat alone in the Greenwich estate. The house was too big for one person. Too quiet. Her phone rang constantly, charities removing her from boards, Friends who no longer returned her calls. She'd lost her son, her reputation, her social standing. All she had left was money. And it turned out money couldn't buy what she actually wanted: legacy, respect. The Pierce name meant something different now. That evening, I took the kids to the playground, pushed Olivia on the baby swing, watched Ethan play with other kids. He was laughing, running, being 5 years old. He ran over to me. "Mommy, look what I found." A dandelion, the kind with the white fluffy seeds. "That's beautiful, baby. Make a wish." I looked at my two children. Healthy, safe, happy. Ethan had started kindergarten and loved it. Olivia was walking now, getting into everything. I don't need to wish for anything. I have everything right here. You have to make a wish. That's the rule. I smiled, blew the dandelion seeds, watched them scatter in the wind. People ask me if I've forgiven Grant. I haven't. Maybe I never will. But I've stopped being angry. Anger takes energy I don't have to spare. They ask if I'm happy. Not every day. Some days are hard. Some days I wake up and can't believe any of this is real. That I survived. That we survived. But most days I'm okay. Better than okay. They ask if it was worth it. The fight, the pain, the public exposure, the trial. And I look at Olivia, who's alive because I didn't give up. Who's walking and laughing and saying mama now. I look at Ethan, who knows his mother fought for him. Who's learning what strength looks like. What integrity looks like. So yes, it was worth it. Not because I won in court. Not because Grant went to prison. Not because I got the money or the house or the foundation. It was worth it because I survived. And I taught my children that survival is just the beginning. Real victory is building something beautiful from the ruins. Real victory is helping others escape. Real victory is living. Really living. On the other side, Grant took everything from me. My marriage, my money, my home, my sense of safety, my trust. But he couldn't take this. My children, my strength, my voice. And that's how I won.